Welcome to Biology 101. Welcome. I'm Jeff Dalton, and everything that I've ever learned about Agile, I learned from becoming an airline pilot. I got my, scary, right? Got my pilot's license in the late 90s, and I studied with an ex-Navy flyer in his 70s. And the first thing he did is he taught me all about agility and what we now call craftsmanship. We used to call it capability back then in our business. And how to create a stable flight. And he taught me all of this while we were flying an airplane. And Charlie had a really unique style. He used to do fun stuff to me, like turn the plane upside down when my eyes were closed, and then tell me to take it from here. He used to turn off the engine when I wasn't looking, and then see how I would respond to that and get me used to dealing with those types of rapid changes all the time. He would have me close my eyes, and then he'd take the aircraft really low over a field and then open my eyes, look out the side 20 feet off the grass, and learn how to react to that. And while he was doing that, he lectured the whole time, and he kept talking about practicing and drilling and building capability, not dropping stuff. And really built those capabilities into me so that they were second nature, they were rote. And that's exactly what we do in our business. So he taught me about agility, how to rapidly change, adjust to change, consider new ideas as I was going, go from a planned flight to an unplanned flight. And he taught me about capability or craftsmanship. And so after 40 hours of training, and you can get your pilot's license in less time than it takes your kid to go through driver's ed. Think about that. And it makes sense because you got to get up there in the air and drive, and that makes sense. But what I did after I got my pilot's license, I was pretty sure that I knew everything. I was a lot younger than I am now. And I piled my kids into the back of the plane, and we headed off to the Star Trek convention in Erie, Pennsylvania. So is anybody from Pennsylvania? If you live near the Appalachian Mountains, you know that it's all about thunderstorms in the summer. So we got into a pretty bad thunderstorm, and if you've ever been in a thunderstorm in a really small aircraft, it can be pretty exciting. We experienced 1,000-foot drops, going upside down, spinning, my kids throwing up in the back seat, all kinds of crying and screaming and exciting things. And all throughout all of this, I started thinking about what Charlie taught me. And the first thing Charlie taught me about were values. And just like in Agile development, Agile software development, values are paramount. They're important. And for a pilot, values include things like, very similar to the Agile Manifesto, actually, collaborate, communicate, be transparent, and there's a few others. Strive to survive, a few other things. Never give up. I was thinking that during this storm. And these are the things we lean on to be valuable, to be successful in what we do. We lean on these things. Every time we get stressed, every time we get overworked, every time we're asked to meet deadlines we can't meet, we lean on the values. We go back and say, our values tell us this is either a good idea or not a good idea. And it's exactly the same with flying. On the craftsmanship side for pilots, we have drilled into us every procedure and every checklist. It makes any process that you're used to working with look like almost nothing, really. Long checklist that we go through during the storm. They actually pull the checklist out, walk through it step by step, level the wings, turn on the carb heat, change the fuel flow, hold the wheel loosely, slow down your speed. These are all things that are drilled into you as areas of craftsmanship that a pilot learns as they're studying to be a pilot. So we've got these two things. We've got these values, or sometimes just called expectations, and we have this craftsmanship piece, this capability. And what that leads is to stability, to stable flight, to surviving the flight. And we're so used to flying. I fly 2-3 times a week. I'm so used to taking off and landing that I don't even think about it. But flying is inherently a very dangerous thing to do, especially my airplane that was built in 1969 and only seats 2 people, or 2.5. Sorry? It's a Piper PA-28-180, thanks. So this idea of stability allows us to innovate. It allows us to have fun with what we're doing. It allows us to enjoy the work we're doing instead of focusing on the stuff that we just hate doing. And so the two things together are super important. And I'm going to talk a little bit about this today. Like I said, my name's Jeff Dalton, and I'm Chief Evangelist with a company called AgileCXO.org. And we're a research and development organization. We assess Agile organizations, Agile companies, and we collect data, and then we build performance models. And we use that data to work with Agile CXOs, CEOs, CTOs, and CIOs, directors, and so forth. And I also recently wrote a book about Agile in the federal government space. And you may be familiar with this. The federal government loves this pretty heavy process model called CMMI. It gets both good and bad reviews depending on who you're talking to. But the federal government is now requiring that companies be both Agile and CMMI compliant. And if you're not familiar with CMMI, it's a 356 practice model that you need to comply with in order to bid on government work, which doesn't sound very Agile, and it isn't. And so somebody needed to write a book to kind of integrate them together. So I did, and you can actually get this. I'll give you a link to it later. Oh, by the way, I'm going to give one of them away for anyone that's interested today. And I'm also going to give away this wonderful book from David Anderson. If you don't know David, he's a great guy. Just did a joint speech with him last week. And he and I wrote a book together also about 7 or 8 years ago. This is Kanban for software. So if anybody is interested in either of these things, I am giving them away in my official OSU cup that I bought down at the bookstore. So I'm just going to hand this to you, and if you want to put your name or business card or whatever in there so I can draw a name, I'll be happy to give that out while we're talking. We'll do that at the end. So you all are here because you're Agile evangelists. You're excited and passionate about agility. And you probably would agree with me that agility is exploding exponentially across the software industry. It's still not dominating, by the way. Does anybody know what the #1 programming language in the world is right now? Who said that? You're absolutely right, by about a factor of 10. COBOL. You know what the most common technology platform in the world is right now? IBM 3090s. Yeah, so those of us that are in the Agile community and we've been building software on small machines for decades, we think that we're dominating, but we're not. But we're getting there. The trend is obviously going up. But it's interesting because Agile is a reaction to a worldwide trend that has nothing to do with software at all. It has to do with a worldwide trend of losing faith in institutions, losing faith in hierarchy, in upper management, in process models like waterfall style or PMP style models. A command and control hierarchy is something that we're losing faith in. And there's a lot of data around this. Gallup did a study last year about this. This is the downward trend from 1973 to 2016 in people's comfort with religion. And this one is their comfort with banks. Look at that trend. How about the media? Gone from 51% down to 20%. Big business, not quite as much, but still has gone down. How about the government, Congress? They didn't poll the people, how people thought about the president, but they polled Congress, and people have lost an immense. As a matter of fact, Congress is the least trusted institution among adults surveyed, 9%. The only thing that's gone up is the military. Interestingly enough, a command and control, by definition, organization, faith in that has actually gone up. But almost every other major institution in the world, people are losing faith in it. And this is a worldwide trend that Agile is just a symptom of. We're seeing this all over, not just in software, but all kinds of organizations and companies. So when you think about how Agile is exploding, that trend is going to continue. Now, part of the problem is that CXOs think that most of their people are not capable enough. In other words, they don't have the appropriate craftsmanship to succeed. And it's really great to hear people at this conference, and I speak at a lot of Agile conferences, and I'm hearing more about craftsmanship here than I've heard at any conference, and I think that's awesome. All I can say is finally we're talking about it, because for the last 10 years in most of the Agile companies I've assessed, they haven't been talking about it. So it's great. So we're trying to solve this problem. Agile CXOs also feel pretty strongly that it's urgent that they get more agile. But here's the problem. Most don't know how to do it. If you've noticed, if you looked across companies, we're living in an agile component of a waterfall world. Our senior management, our business operations, our accounting, our sales are all based on phase-based command and control type environment while we're off trying to be iterative, agile, and self-organizing. There is definitely a collision starting to happen in the business because the senior management doesn't know how to make the rest of their company agile. And until we're looking at agile for business, we will never expand up beyond the Scrum team or the team level. So this is a problem. So very few director, vice president, CIO, CTO, parts of our organizations that we work in are agile themselves. I can only think of one company out of 100 in the last 2 years where I've been involved in assessing where the management was actually an agile management organization. So it's very rare. Part of it is they don't know how to do it, and part of it is they have no idea what it means. They don't understand what it means. And they've looked at a lot of models. So a lot of them have looked at CMMI. A lot of them, especially here in Columbus, believe it or not, there's a lot of companies, but all federal government and state governments are trying to use that as a model to build craftsmanship and capability. But CMMI has some craftsmanship, but zero workflow, project management, or governance. Scrum, obviously, is very popular. It's the most popular Agile framework. It's got great workflow and work management, but very limited government and doesn't address craftsmanship much. And then Holarchy, if you're not familiar with that, it's starting to get really hot right now. It's all governance, but no workflow and no craftsmanship. Sir, question?
So the term craftsmanship you mean by, is it the process or the methodology or what exactly?
I mean being good at what you do. I mean having capability. You being a good coder, clean coder, low defects. And the
skill aspect of it.
Demonstrated skill, right? A lot of people have skill and can't get work out. So demonstrated skill, right? We usually, outside of the Agile community, we use the word capability for this. Very similar concept. So there isn't one model that kind of pulls this all together and helps leaders succeed and transform their organization. And there is no enterprise agility without self-organization. And unless we have self-organization, if we have our teams being in a command and control environment, we can't practically exercise agility, not successfully. Yeah, we can run sprints and we can do agile work and we can have a backlog and we can do all of those technical things to be agile, but we're not exercising the values or the foundation behind all of it. And very few agile leaders really understand what those things are. And so it turns out that the opposite of what we think is true is required to achieve enterprise agility. In other words, rather than less definition, we need more definition. But we just need it defined around the right things. The level of precision and discipline required for self-organizing teams is immense, and most companies don't do it. It starts with a constitutional model. Everybody understanding exactly what the rules are, what their roles are, what's expected of them, so that they can have the autonomy and the authority to make the decisions without asking permission. I think it might have been Christopher Avery yesterday. Chris and I go way back. Was talking about I can't remember the exact quote, but it was something about not having to ask permission. Right? Somebody was tweeting about it. I missed it, but if we have a constitutional model, we can stop asking permission to do things. We have clear understanding of not only what my role is, but what authorities I have. I, as a senior manager, am able to push that decision making for the first time down to you and not even think about it. I'm going to talk about that in a minute. And that's a hallmark of holacracy, which we're seeing a lot in the business world, but not so much in IT. The key to making this work is to separate role from soul. In other words, instead of me having a title, instead of me being a senior developer, I have a set of roles that I am responsible to execute, and I have the authority to make decisions on. Sometimes we share roles. Sometimes you and I have the same role, and we have to collaborate. But this notion of a job title being a good descriptor of what you do is pretty archaic and very non-agile. Yet our agile teams, we're all walking around saying we're senior developers, we're business analysts, we're architects. We're acting in a very waterfall kind of way by using job titles. Role definitions allow you and I to agree on what your authorities are, and then I don't have to manage you anymore. I can focus as a senior manager, and I've been a CIO and a CTO of multiple companies. I can focus on innovation and strategy, which is what I'm paid to do, instead of focusing on managing your tasks and answering your questions. So this notion of role versus soul, if you do nothing from this presentation except for take this with you and go back to your office and define all your roles on sticky notes, and then all of the things you have authority to do under those roles underneath it. If you don't do that at your team level, if you do that, you'll get something really good out of this presentation. This is the most powerful thing that I have to say to you. We do this in our company. We have no titles, we have no managers. We're completely self-organizing, but we started with this. The case study for this, by the way, is Zappos. They're the ones that have done this at scale, about 2,500 employees. So what we've done is we've assessed a whole bunch of organizations, and we've gone through what leaders need to understand to have a successful Agile organization, not just in software, but across everything. Because if we're all off iterating and they're all off waterfalling, we're going to have nothing but frustration ultimately. So we need to make sure we're paying attention to that problem. And the way we couch this is in the notion of a holon. And a holon is something that is simultaneously a part and a whole. So a good example of a holon would be a cell in your body. Cell is a standalone independent thing that doesn't need any direction at all, but it interacts with other cells to make things happen. That's what a holon is. And it was first popularized in this book called Ghost in the Machine. And looking around the room, and not too many people are old enough to probably have read that, but maybe you and me. It was back in the 60s. And think of this as an object-oriented behavior organism. Inside of each holon is a demonstratable and verifiable behavior that a senior management can learn, understand, and then and let you execute with complete authority. And a holon has three components in our model: an action, a role, and an outcome. So then as a manager, I can align these holons around the strategy, the things that I want to do, so that my team can go off and perform in the way that they need to. And then we've placed all of the related holons into a circle. And we organize using circles instead of hierarchies in this model. And we've gone through, and through our assessments, we've said, in this example, for instance, teaming has 6 things that are really important, and that we can segment across 6 different holons or subcircles, and each one of these has a set of actions, roles, and outcomes that are required to execute them. So I'll go through those in a minute. A holarchy is a hierarchy of holons. If you can get your mind around that. It's a peer relationship between organizations inside your company that work together and all have their authorities completely defined and don't have to ask permission. It's an empirical behavioral model. It's not a model that tells you what you have to do and what you're required to do. It's an action that we expect you to execute in a way that makes sense for your team. Right? So if you want to do sprint reviews in a certain way, that's okay. A different team can do them a different way as long as the actions and the outcomes are similar. This way we can measure and assign authorities across all of these as a senior manager. Instead of focusing on tasking, we can focus on the process itself and pull the levers so that we can both build, transform, and then evaluate organizational agility. So each one of these holons we can measure and determine, are you good at doing this? So I'm going to go through a couple of them just to give you a sense. This is a fairly new model we've been working with. The state of Michigan is piloting this with us. They're a 3,500 IT professional organization. A couple of federal agencies are piloting this with you, and we're doing it with a couple of commercial companies right now. But we always start here. We always start with leaders, because leaders really don't understand how to lead Agile organizations. The one company that I've seen do this so well happens to be here in Columbus. But especially in the government sector, especially in the federal government sector, they don't have a clue on how to drive organizational agility. So we start with them. So this performance circle calls for them to be experts at projecting values, setting a vision for the team, engaging with the team personally, and enabling them with tools and space and various other things that they might need. So we always start with the values with them, and you're probably familiar with these. We start with these, and we give them a checkbook that says, here's all the values that you need to adhere to, and here's what they mean. Most of the time, in most of the companies we work with, they look at you like you're a nut when you talk about values. They have no idea what you're talking about. They say, oh yeah, we do all those things. We have openness, but just don't talk to that guy over there because that'll be offensive to him. Don't bother the customer. Sure, we want to have collaboration, but we don't want to take any of their time. So these are the kind of things that we see all the time. This is a serious problem we're trying to solve. Lack of Agile values is the #1 impediment to enterprise Agile. The #1 impediment. If you have a senior management organization in your company that understands Agile values, lives them, and projects them throughout the whole organization, your company's 1 in a million. The only way we get to enterprise Agile, we can implement SAFe, we can implement DAD, we can implement CMMI plus Scrum, we can implement Enterprise Scrum, we can do all of that, but if our senior management isn't tuned into the values, it's going to be an exercise in frustration. Those models that I just reeled off were designed because senior management does not buy into the values, and we're trying to prop it up. There's nothing wrong with Scrum and XP or Kanban just the way it is if senior management is projecting the values. It's important that they understand, and this is part of this model, that values trace to frameworks which then trace to techniques and ceremonies. So something like as simple as a daily stand-up traces right to an Agile value like transparency. Something like sprint review traces right to an Agile value of collaboration. So this values traceability is the first thing that you'll want to do if you're going through an Agile transformation program. Lay the values out, then identify all of the techniques and ceremonies being used throughout your company. And I promise me, if you guys are doing product backlogs with planning poker and sprint backlogs like you're supposed to, the people over on the business side aren't doing that. They're doing Microsoft Project and phases, and they're funding it that way. And you're hiring vendors that are being treated in a waterfall way and in their contracts, even though you're demanding that they use agility. And I'm going to cover that in a second. So this notion of values traceability is a really important part of Agile transformation, and this model demands it. I'm not going to go through all the details, but the way this is laid out, and you'll be able to get a download of this at some point, the way it's laid out is each one of those holons has a set of actions associated with it. So on the valuing holon, for instance, define the values, communicate them, deploy them, ensure they're aligned with frameworks and functions, and sustain them, and each one of those has roles and definitions associated with it. We always start with leadership. We do this one second because this is the goat rodeo. Do you know what a goat rodeo is? You ever watched? Never mind. The solution definition is a mess. Most of the companies we assess, their customers don't write user stories. They don't have product owners. They have IT people serving as product owners. And when we have a system that says we're not going to write a lot of stuff down, we're going to collaborate, we're going to co-locate, we're going to do all these great things, and we're going to reduce the risk by doing all these, and then our customer doesn't write the stories, we eliminate, we corrupt the architecture. And this is what we see in all of these. So we put together a whole set of actions and activities around 2 levels of solution design. One, road mapping, which is big picture, product level, and the other is defining the solution. And that includes an architecture around stories that I'll show you in a second. And the road mapping is more about open spaces and doing releases and things like that. I call tier 1 of the story, or what we call the storybook solution, the hallucination level. Up here, the hallucination level, the customer who doesn't know anything about how the systems work, doesn't understand the business logic because that's been ceded to IT for 30 years. The control of business logic is ceded to IT for at least 30 years. If you go to General Motors and ask them how it works, they'll refer you to an IT person. This is normal. This is typical. We need to take that back. So we call this the hallucination level. The epic level is really what traditionally is thought of as user stories, the stuff the customer asks for, the needs. And then the story level, everybody knows what that is. We've done something a little different here. Every single level of the storybook has its own definition of done and its own estimation model. And we do this because we're trying to drive out as many defects as possible. About 70% of defects, according to the Software Engineering Institute anyway, fall right here in what the customer asks you for. About 70% of software defects. So we're trying to drive that out. So each one of these definitions of done has a set of criteria to determine whether this is a good epic or a good story. And we do that in 2 levels. Yes, sir?
So the value thing that you were talking about, Jeff, is it this hallucination process, or is it something different, the value mapping?
This here?
The previous slide you were
You're talking about this one?
No, the next one, the value stuff.
This here?
Value definition. So what is it? Yeah, how do you establish the value and arrive at the vision?
Yeah, so this is the establishment of Agile values right here. So this is the establishment of these 9 things.
Right, or the product value, or do you talk to them on the product value,
Okay.
business value?
So that's in here. So that's in the road mapping, right? The product value is what's the mission of the product, what's the value of it, what's the ROI of it. That's missing from almost all Agile projects nowadays, and that happens in this road mapping section, right? What we used to call requirements is here, defining the solution. And remember, every holon is an action, a role, and an outcome. So the people that define the hallucination are different than the people that define the needs, potentially. And then we see tier 3, we finally bit the bullet and said, stories are never written by the product owner. They're almost always written as a collaborative effort between teams and product owners, right? That's really normal, even though if you read Schwaber's book, he wouldn't say it that way. But we're saying it that way because that's what everybody's doing. And it makes sense. If you're going to cede control of your business to IT and software, which is what's happening, they have to be involved in writing the stories because many of them know the logic in a way the business doesn't know. But we need to keep the risk low, so we got 3 tiers here to drive that out, and that's what this looks like. Finally, we get into this stuff.
How does your definition of done in those layers looks like, epic definition of done? How does it?
Yeah, so there's 2 components to what we propose. We call it a pre and a post validation. The pre-validation is a format check to make sure that every single epic has a mission, a business value, and a user, right? Just like a traditional user story, though we use the term mission a little bit differently. So every one, the epics and the stories all have to have those. The product definition of done is a completely different. It's a set of criteria about what a good requirement is, sort of a traditional requirement. So we just have different criteria for each level because that's where about 50% of the defects are injected. They're just bad requirements. They're just poorly written. So the number 1 defect of any software program is that we misunderstood the requirement. It was poorly written. And then the post-validation is, does it pass the set of criteria we've set? So if it's invest or SMART or whatever criteria you guys have decided to use. Invest is the most common, but so they said pre and post validation. That's not the same as requirements validation, which is a whole different thing, right? This is just the pre-check. This is what you're used to calling Agile. Yeah, the reason we did it, we know that you know how to do this. We want leadership to understand this because they don't. Leadership doesn't understand why you need to sit in one room. Leadership doesn't understand what pair programming is about, why they have to fund a second developer. And the other reason we did this, and you're not going to like this, is that most Agile organizations don't do it right. I'm working with a really large company right now, prides themselves on agility and being enterprise Agile, and they use pair programming for validation, which is a great thing to do. That's a fantastic technique if you use it. So during our assessment, we did a Gemba walk, and we walked around, and we probably passed 50 different teams. How many of them do you think were actually doing pair programming? 1 out of 50. All right. Test-driven development, same thing. Couldn't find evidence of it. Sprint demos where the product owner was there. So we felt it was really important to face the music on this, and I'm sure all of you are doing it perfectly in this room, but there's an awful lot of teams that aren't. So if I'm a senior manager and I'm a director, I want to have faith that my team can self-organize, and if I don't understand what it looks like, because I promise you they don't understand what it looks like, they don't, we defined it for them. We said pair programming, there's a navigator, there's a programmer, they sit together. It's, we spelled it all out for them. There's nothing in here you don't recognize, I'm sure. There's just a sample list of the kinds of things that are in this one. But we wanted senior leaders to really understand what was continuous integration. When teams say, and it's funny, some of these assessments that I do, I go on site and I say, I want to see a daily stand-up. And they say, well, we're not having it today. And their senior management has no idea that how important that is, that the 15-minute every day meeting is so important. So we spelled it out for them. And we really went deep on this. I wanted to show you this picture because this is one of our clients, one of the companies we work with, doing some estimation with dart guns. So they have targets on the wall with 1, 2, 3, 5, 8, 13, 21, et cetera. And that's how they do it. So we really dug deep on all the different techniques we could find. This model doesn't require you to use planning poker or Fibonacci team estimating or this. It only requires that you do a relative sizing model for your estimating. And if you're normalizing points, you're not Agile, sorry. Just had to say that. So this is a cool game. You get the targets made and you give everybody the guns and they have a blast, obviously, but it works really well. Now we get back to some leadership stuff. The genesis of this model was supplier driven. So the federal government is now saying all suppliers, software suppliers, need to be Agile. But there is a 3-line definition in their playbook about what Agile is. It says Agile is iterative and incremental and delivers stuff fast. That's what the federal government thinks it is. Now, we can all, ignore the federal government, that's fine, except that they have about a $100 billion IT budget. They own the market. Compared to what most of us do, they own the market. General Motors has a $10 billion IT budget, and that's pretty massive. So you can't ignore a $100 billion IT budget. So we developed this part of it to help people pick suppliers that are Agile and write contracts. So when we teach our Agile leadership classes, we often have attorneys from the Attorney General's office there learning about Agile so they can write the contracts in order to pick their Agile suppliers. Partnering with Agile suppliers, empowering your teams with the tools and the space and the authorities they need. And then something else, enterprise retrospectives. Nobody's doing them. It's really great that Scrum teams kind of sort of have retrospectives sometimes, and that's about what it is a lot. But it would be really even better if people would learn from it and different people in the organization could learn. So this notion of enterprise is good. That's just a little thing. Retrospectives, but also enterprise retrospectives, and an architecture to store and share and communicate best practices and ideas, and then a whole set of practices around partnering, contracting, getting paid, managing milestones with Agile suppliers. So in the state of Michigan, one of their big suppliers, they'll remain nameless, but you know their name as a big Agile shop here in Columbus, 60-day sprints. 60-day sprints for a project that they don't know anything about. So the state doesn't know how to measure that. They don't understand why that's a bad thing. Another one of their vendors, which is a massive consulting firm that you've also heard of, has 6-month sprints. And the CIO at the state of Michigan is like, hey, we're doing Agile here. This is awesome, right? They don't understand what to look for, especially the procurement agencies. They don't understand what to look for in a waterfall environment, let alone an Agile environment. So somebody needs to put a stake in the ground and say, this is what it looks like. So that's what we've done here. Another area that is need of a lot of work with Agile teams, especially at scale, is the notion of quality, both testing and process quality. So Agile organizations tend to be really good with the automation, but not so good with things like code reviews, peer reviews, quality evaluations, self-assessments, all the things you need to do to make sure you're being Agile and aligning with Agile values. So one of the things I like to do when I was a CIO is do my Gemba walk and go out and witness and observe stand-ups, sprint demos, and then have a session with the team afterward and say, you know, that daily stand-up, you guys didn't really talk about what you did and what you did. You really just gave a status report. We need to clean that up. Sprint demos, the wrong people were there. Planning poker, the manager came in and told you what the numbers were. This is really common behavior. So and this is something that Agile teams don't like, by the way. They don't like someone coming in and observing them and then explaining to them that they're not really doing it the way they need to. But I'm here to tell you, after assessing hundreds of companies, that we need to do it to ourselves, because there's just a lot of sloppiness in the market. And then the most important one, and the last one, for those of you that are getting tired after lunch, is the teaming. And we really don't have good guidelines in the Agile community around what teaming really means. We have team agreements. Those are all really good. But what about governance infrastructure? What about communities of practice so we can manage ourselves? If we're going to have a self-organizing culture, we need to have communities of practice where we can govern ourselves and make our own decisions about things like technologies and tools and methods and things like that. So this is a picture from Holacracy that's pretty cool. And each one of these circles has its own small governance mechanism. And of course, they integrate together. So this notion of communities of practice is super important in self-organization. Lots of stuff in here, everything from training to mentoring, to role versus soul, to self-organization and governance, self-training, all these kinds of things are all in there. Again, Agile leadership needs to fund all this. They need to pay for all this. They need to make sure it's happening, and they're not doing that today. So they're just depending on the teams to do it themselves. So that's the whole model. That's the 6 performance circles. There's a whole bunch of stuff in here. It's a 150-page book with lots of data in it that you'll be able to glean from. But the second part of it is how we evaluate when we work with your company. So this is a self-evaluation tool, a way to determine a level of performance and craftsmanship in each one of the 6 circles. So we're looking at each one of these individually and determining, using data, whether you're in the adopting level. If you're in an adopting level, you're just learning, you're just starting to roll out, you don't have buy-in from management, but you're doing some good things. You're in the transforming level. You're using consistent Agile techniques across all projects. You're self-organizing. And in your mastering level, where the entire company is really mastering agility, including senior management. And one of the big differences with this model versus some of the others that are in the industry, not around Agile, but around like CMMI and ISO and so forth, is that we're looking very closely at senior management. Make sure they're on board with the values. So the cool thing about this is there's no process implied. There's no sequence implied. It's not a process. This is just a set of actions and activities and roles that have to take place in some sequence that you can add or reduce rigor or intensity based on the needs of the organization. So if you have a really small team, you have some very lightweight needs on some of these things. But if you're building the space shuttle or the next one anyway, you're obviously going to have some enterprise types of infrastructure in place. And you have the ability to turn any of these on or off or up or down. So let me give you an example of how that might work. And I'm getting close to the end here. Before I did this for a living, well, I was a software engineer originally, but before that, I spent about a decade as a musician. My first degree was in music. I spent a lot of time in the recording studio. I still do, but I made my living doing it then. And I learned that the guy that sits behind the mixing board is everything. He's the guy or girl that turns the levers of process. As a matter of fact, they call it processing. That turns the levers of process, the ones that turn that level of rigor up. We want to have more intensity in this holon, less intensity in this one. We want to color this one a certain way. We want to change this one. And this is the person that makes Justin Bieber sound really good. So I'm going to show you an example because this is exactly how you would use a model like this, or any process model, really. So here we have our Scrum Master and our Product Owner and our Scrum team.
It's dramatic. We're not going to make it. We'll never see the light again. But I will keep on going till the end.
The hardworking Scrum Master. Yeah. So I've worked with a couple of singers like that. And but the really cool thing about any process architecture, and I know that the word process is not a great word for Agile people, but the great thing about an architecture like this is, as a leader, and all of you are going to be leaders someday, you have levers now to control performance. You can look at these individual holons and say, I need another role in there, I need a different action, I need a different outcome, I need to increase the intensity of it, I need to automate this. And I was talking to Roy at nationwide.com. Huge company, his email is Roy. He must be important, yeah, Mr. Nationwide. If you have these levers at your disposal, then you have a conversation. Then you know what to talk about. Instead of saying, oh, it's not working real well, I'm not sure what we're supposed to do. We got a whole list of things. We can pinpoint the problems. We can measure the ones that are giving us trouble, and we can improve upon them and use them as real input into our retrospectives to very rapidly improve in a very iterative and meaningful way. So once you have an architecture in place, and it almost doesn't make any difference which one it is. This is the only one that is pure Agile. But a lot of companies use ISO, a lot of companies use ITIL, a lot of companies use CMMI. I'm not endorsing or not endorsing any of those things, but this one is just pure Agile. So anyway, if this interests you, we're having a summit in DC, September 22nd. It's going to be, it's going to have a lot of stuff about this. It's going to have some great guest speakers, maybe somebody you know from Columbus, and entertainment and liquor. So if you want to come to that, just go to agilecxo.org. And let's give some books away before I show you my last bit. Do we have the cup anywhere? You want to run that up here, sir? Or pass it up, or whatever it is. While you're up here, you can, if you haven't put your card in there or your name on a piece of paper, feel free to do that. Why don't you help out by picking a couple of names for us? You look like a jovial kind of guy. Your card's in there? That's okay. I'll let you win. Hey, what's your name?
Srini.
Shirini? Yeah. Okay. Shirini. No, I'm just kidding. Steve Sattler. Kanban or Scrum for the government? Which one would you like? Kanban. Of course. Why don't you come on up and get that? This is a great book if you haven't read it, by the way. And we're going to pick one more. Here, I'll just set it right here for you. Steve, congratulations. And one more, thank you. I'll just take that. Sorry, it's not you. Thank you, Alan. There you go, sir. Enjoy that. A lot of good information in there for you.
Thank you.
Good, excellent. Okay, well, let's get it wrapped up here. This model is fairly young, but it's going to be available in book format on Amazon in a couple of months. So you'll be able to download it. But you can always go to agilecxo.org and preview it and see what else is out there. The other cool thing that's out there is that you may be interested in is we do podcasts with CIOs. And we've done, I think, 8 state CIOs. And actually, Kevin Fisher from Nationwide is one of our guests as well. So you can go out there. It's totally free. We're an R&D organization. We're not a consulting firm, so we don't charge anything. And you'll be able to download all this stuff and listen to the podcast for free. So it's kind of cool. So any questions before we're done? Yes, sir.
So, what is the success rate of this model that you have implemented? So, I mean, obviously you're targeting the mid-management, upper management.
Upper management,
So
yeah.
it's obviously the toughest area to even to go and talk about people.
Yeah, so it's a fairly young model, so we haven't been through the full cycle with anybody. We're just adopting it in the clients I talked to you about earlier. So I don't have good data for you on that yet.
And Spotify also, I heard about Spotify kind of jumping around the edge of framework. I mean,
Yeah, they're doing some self-organization stuff. They haven't adopted holacracy fully, but they're doing it. They're trying to do it. So this notion of self-organization is a huge part of this, and we all talk about it, but without a method and a model to adopt, it doesn't mean just doing what we want to do. It means there's a technique and a method behind it, and this model has all of that stuff in it. And holacracy is a governance model that has all that.
so can we call this holacracy as a kind of safe prescriptive model for the middle management thing, because on the governance model,
Yeah, I would call it a governance model, not a prescriptive model, more behavioral. So it has some prescription in it, but not a lot. On this, we purposefully avoided all prescription. We want you to decide empirically what works best for your team, but it's a what to do, not a how to do it. All right, anything else? Yes, sir.
So when you go talk to CXOs, do you talk to them about holons and these types of things? Is this the kind of a presentation that you give to them? Or?
Well, they usually can't sit through something this long, but it's more about values and that there is a model they can use, and then they're going to bring in their team, and their team's going to adopt this. So it's hard to get a CEO through a 45-minute, 40 PowerPoint slide presentation, but it's easy to get them through a talk about CIOs. I heard somebody talking earlier. I can't remember who it was, but they were asking about a big company they know about using CMMI, the capability maturity model, if you're not familiar with it. And they were saying, I don't understand why we're using that. We're coders. Why are we using this big model? And the answer is that CIOs and CTOs love models like this because it gives them levers of management that they don't have otherwise. It would be awesome if we could all just code and everybody did the right thing and there was no management required at all. But that's just not how the world works. And CIOs and CEOs love models. They love what Gartner says. They love models like ITIL and all that kind of stuff. Yes, sir.
There's a lot of levers in there.
There are.
Is there, has work been done to trace the levers to the results? Or is it just sort of move all of them?
No, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to imply that. Everything in the model is optional, so it depends on your goals and objectives. So it's a survey of everything, but there's no requirement if you adopt the model to use everything in it.
But you can trace the levers to specific results.
Yeah, and every lever's traced to the results and also traced to one or more of the values. All right. So I don't have data for you on that yet, but maybe next year I will. This is new this year. Anything else? Yes, sir.
Sort of following up on that. So what do the executives resonate with when it comes to talking about Agile? Because I can certainly see how a number of these concepts might be threatening to a standard command and control model.
Very much so, yes.
So what is it that resonates with the CXOs when you talk about trying to move to this kind of a new paradigm?
Yeah. What resonates the most is that they can make their customers happier. Most IT organizations are at war with their business, most. And the fact that they can make them happier and make them full partners, the biggest response I get to this is, if this will help me be partners with the business, I want to do it. Because they're at odds with most of their business customers. And so if they can partner better, so the solution can be better and that can increase their customer satisfaction, that's what resonates the most with them.
Internal and external customers then?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, and external's really tough, right? Because you can't control anything and they don't care about Agile, all they care about is results. So I think you need to when you're talking to your CXO about this, you don't really need to talk to them about Agile because they don't care. What they care about is, I've got an idea for making our customers really happy, for controlling budgets better, for controlling scope better, for keeping employees more satisfied and attracting and retaining better people. I've got a model for this. Are you interested? And the answer is always going to be yes, because that's what's in it for them. If you go to them and say, oh, we got this Agile thing, it's cool, we're going to do iterations, and we're going to do spikes, and we're going to do retro. They don't care about any of that. What they want to know is, are my customers going to be happier, and are you going to be able to control scope?
And are you inclining it towards any scaling frameworks in this model, or no?
I'm not, no. Yeah, I want to avoid any criticism of scaling model, scaling like scaled Agile you're talking about. I'm not a big fan. I'm kind of the Schwaber camp on that. I think Scrum is great and XP is great, and we need a model like this to scale it. But we don't need we don't need to turn Scrum into waterfall in order to scale Scrum. That's my personal feeling. Yeah. Lots of people disagree with me. Federal government loves SAFe. You know why they love SAFe? It's waterfall, basically, with some Agile stuff embedded in it. So everybody's nodding, so I'm assuming you agree with me. Anything else? Good. Well, enjoy the conference. Appreciate you coming out. Thanks a lot.